Hello, I'm Spencer Owen and this is The Rail. Now, with the transfer window in England closing in little over a week's time, today we're talking transfers and finding out the real stories behind the headlines. I'm going to be looking at it from three different perspectives. I'm talking to a player, an agent and a journalist to try and uncover some of the myths behind transfer deadline day and finding out how your clubs go about their business. First off, I'll be chatting to Ozcan, who's an agent operating out of Hamburg in Germany, currently representing over 25 players. Talk to me about the role of an agent with a transfer deal.
Our job is to represent our players. You can say a bit of an advisor, accountant and a lawyer.
At what point does an agent get involved?
The actual way it should be done is once a club is interested in a player, they'll get in touch with a club that the player plays for, and ask to discuss transferring him. Then the club will get in contact with me. We sit down, we discuss with the club, and if we come into agreement and we like their project, then we will sign.
As an agent, do you not make the majority of your money on when the transfer happens, or do you still is it an ongoing process?
Well, what happens is once we agreed on the transfers, once we agree on the contract, then we have a discussion regarding agency fees. In England, getting 10% is very, very hard. But you could also, as an agent, I could also have an agreement with a club there where I ask for a certain percentage of a player's transfer.
What about transfer deadline day? Let's talk about that. I imagine that must be a particularly hectic day for someone like yourself.
It's very, very hectic. Everything has to be done quick. You don't have the time to play mind games.
Have you had any instances where you thought a deal was done, you're feeling confident, you spoke to your player, he's getting ready to move and whatnot, and then you found out that maybe the club was using your deal as a potential backup to another deal and they've actually gone another way last minute?
It happens, but it would only happen with clubs who I would say crazily run. For example, crazy sporting director, or sporting directors are the guys who make the transfers. Most managers don't even have control.
But yeah, it's usually them that get the blame.
There's a club that's based in London that made a very awful transfer policy. They had a big money coming in, but they spent the money very, very badly. I mean, the sporting directors sometimes have to get sacked because they're the one who run the club. Well, run the club as in the footballers, the managers, the coach staff. If there's a failure with the transfers that is brought in, and there's no success, and so you're wasting the club's money.
Muzzy, thanks very much, mate. I appreciate that. A little bit more insight into the world of football agents.
My pleasure.
Very interesting stuff there from Muzzy. Good to get a bit more insight into how these agents operate. Next, I'll be talking to Dominic Fifield, who's a Guardian journalist, who's going to tell us a bit more about how the press tackle transfer rumours. With a transfer story that you're going to necessarily cover, where does it all start?
You might get fed a little line by an agent. You might hear on the grapevine at a game. You might talk to a member of the hierarchy of a club. Especially if you spend any time around a football club's training ground, there's a rumour mill active in that environment anyway. And if you can tap into that, it'll give you the seeds of a story. Most Premier League clubs these days won't comment on transfer issues unless they really want something out there. You're basically piecing together all these hints,
clues,
and then you get a story which you mould into something that is readable.
Proper professional journalist, you've got to do due diligence. You can't just print something that's pure hearsay. And I guess that's a big difference perhaps that sometimes gets forgotten nowadays with the internet, is the sheer amount of research and work that will go into a printed story.
The reality is, I don't think any journalist out there will just make something up. There's always a grain of truth.
No smoke without fire.
Yeah. There's always an element, there's always somebody has fed a line for a reason perhaps, and maybe a transfer doesn't come off, or maybe an agent or a player is agitating for a new contract, so he gets out there, there's interest from other clubs, and that's written by the journalist, and then 2 weeks later he's signing a new 5-year contract at X, Y or Z, and there's always an element of truth in what is written.
What's a normal transfer deadline day look like for you?
You think now you're filing throughout the day and then maybe updating for the paper, maybe updating for second edition. The newspaper that I work for wants stuff out online. As soon as you've verified something, they want it out there. They want to own that story. They want possession of that story, which means that the day itself is quite frantic. You have things like live blogs going on, and you're feeding stuff onto Twitter as well, and Facebook and things like that. And it's dramatically changed the landscape, the internet and social media in that respect. but in quite an entertaining way.
So you won't be like at a certain club or part of the country, you'll be based in one place?
It's a day of being on the phone and talking to people, trying to get hold of agents, trying to get hold of clubs, waiting for confirmation of deals.
From a journalistic point of view, is it purely the more deals the better? Or do you sometimes like there just to be a few big ones to talk about, and then you can talk about the lack of movement sometimes is a story in itself?
These days it's all about big transfers, big moves, and you may find those don't actually take place on transfer deadline day. If a club has been extraordinarily busy on the day and maybe brought in 3 or 4 signings, which does happen, especially with promoted clubs or clubs that are fighting relegation in January, then you've got another natural story there.
So when a club comes in out of nowhere and buys someone you've never heard of, which must happen fairly regularly,
yeah, it does.
You have to have a load of people you can talk to and say, tell me about this guy, how good is he, and you've got to trust those sources.
You'll go to, my natural instinct would be to go to a journalist on the ground over there. Yeah. A player comes in from Marseille, you go to a journalist at La Provence, a player comes in from Paris Saint-Germain, you go to Le Parisien, and you talk to them about what the player will offer, what he's done, what he's been like, what's his temperament like, is he likely to fit in over here? Gives you enough maybe to I don't know, form an educated judgment on what their prospects are likely to be.
Okay, Dom, thanks very much for telling us more about it, and I hope transfer deadline day isn't too stressful for you.
Thanks very much.
So that's the press's viewpoint. Finally today, I'm going to be talking to a player to find out what it's like to actually be the goods that are bought and sold on transfer deadline day. The player I'm speaking to is called Rowan Vine. He's had a 15-year career spanning 14 different clubs. He's also had millions of pounds spent on him, including big money moves to Birmingham and to QPR, and he knows exactly what it's like to be at the centre of this media frenzy. You've played for a lot of different clubs and you've had millions of pounds spent on you. First question I've got to ask is that quite surreal? I know you're used to it as a footballer, but the fact that it's a business that has paid millions of pounds for you to come and play football, how does that feel as a player the first time that happens?
Yeah, it is quite surreal for anyone, I think. Obviously the numbers get astronomical the higher you go up. So I went for 3 million about a year and a half after I'd gone for 200 grand.
Say you're at a club and you hear about another club's interest in you, you're in good form, like you say. What's the first thing that happens?
Historically, I think it probably was that you just get your head down and play your football, and a team comes and approaches your team and sees if you're available.
Sometimes there can be a story that comes out of nothing. That a certain journalist or someone's Twitter account has said something.
There's many ways to manipulate the press and the media, and you've got players' wives, mums. A lot of people want to hide behind different smoke screens.
Have you ever been in a situation where you don't necessarily want to leave, but the club are looking to do a deal because it's too good to turn down?
Say when I was at Luton and it was around about the Christmas period, me and another boy had been subject of a joint bid, right. And he told me as I was running out to start the game, after the warm-up, he pulls me and says, we've just turned down X amount of million for you and him. We've rejected it, so then I've got to go and play a game.
Why has he said that?
I don't know. He said managers have different ways of doing things, and to be honest, we went 1-0 down, and then 2 minutes later I've scored. So I don't know. It was a cup game. It worked or not because they sold me 10 days later. I didn't get to play the replay.
What's the player's relationship like with an agent? Does it depend on the agent's individual character, or do you look at him as someone that's really important person in terms of you finding a club and getting on in your career?
The buck stops with the player, really. If he knows he's got a good agent and he's happy with the agent, then that's no matter what the agent appears to anyone else. If the player's happy, then that's fine.
Well, Ronaldo must like his agent because he just bought him in Ireland. We've had a few instances recently, the likes of Raheem Sterling kind of forcing Liverpool's hand in getting that move to Man City. David De Gea hasn't left yet, but he very much could do, and that's against something that his club want to happen. How important is the player within the transfer? How much freedom do they have to kind of choose where they go?
The Raheem Sterling one was handled a little bit badly by Liverpool and by his representatives and himself. He shouldn't have been doing interviews, he shouldn't have said anything. And the football club were going to sell him for 49 million. It's not a bad deal for them. I just don't understand why he would be hung out to dry in an interview, because that was all that happened from that certain interview. Raheem Sterling could have signed that deal, still probably would have been sold. I mean, David De Gea hasn't acted badly whatsoever. No. In the end, he's still probably going to be painted as a bad guy by Man United.
Yeah. As a player, if you're in that situation, what do you do? Do you try your very best to get yourself in that shop window to attract attention, or do you let your past performances speak for you, and do you kind of make more of a political statement and not want to go out for the club and perform because you want them to get rid of you?
I'd never advise someone, or I've never been advised, or never took the advice of refusing to play. In football, that is criminal, because refusing to play in the reserves or refusing to go here or refusing to go there to these training camps, that's come later on. And it's something that definitely leaves a bad taste, because you're employed by the football club to play football. I don't know how we've got to the point where people in football can advise footballers to behave like that.
What about the recent Fabian Delph saga?
He should never have made that statement about loyalty, about being at the right club. That statement is for the fans. That statement is just for the fans to say there is loyalty in football, this is what it is. And then you go back on it, which makes the fans feel like even worse about the situation and feel like that was just a lie.
All right, Rowan, thanks very much for that,
No
mate.
problem.
Much
Thanks a lot.
appreciated.
Cheers, top man.
That's it from us. If you've enjoyed hearing about the world of agents, make sure you look out for an agent special coming soon on Copper 90, featuring Muzzy and some other agents as well. Drop a like on the video if you've enjoyed it. Subscribe for more. I'll see you next time.